What's going on, everybody? I hope all of you are having a great night or afternoon or morning, whenever you're watching this podcast or going to listen to the podcast. I appreciate you as always. Welcome to the newest edition of the Hub of Champions pod. It's a two-box edition, which means I have a guest on. And this guest, I can't think of anyone better to have on right now than someone who is pitching the major league, someone who was a vital part of Boston sports lore. I mean, if you are a Red Sox fan, you should know the name of Lenny DiNardo. I mean, but number one, he works as a baseball analyst on NESN. That's number one. Number two, this year is the 20-year anniversary of the '04 Red Sox team that broke the curse. So throughout the entire 2024 season, you will be hearing a lot of '04 references, '04 celebrations, and so forth. But hopefully, the 2024 season won't be the only thing that Red Sox fans will be celebrating the '04 season, and it won't be the only reason why. But all in all, Lenny DiNardo of NESN joins the Hub of Champions podcast. Welcome aboard. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. You're right. The season is getting here quick, right? Everybody's down south, or most of everybody's down south, pitchers and catchers. I keep tuning in to see what the news breaks for that given day, and I see TC down there talking to Cora and all the new guys, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time. Whether you think the Red Sox are going to be really good this year, or whether you think they're going to play poor, it's an exciting time. You never really know what's going to happen, so there's energy no matter what.
Absolutely, and that's part of the reason why whenever the spring training begins, there's always an air of excitement. There's always an air of anticipation, and that's the beauty of baseball season. Spring training, the smell of fresh grass. It's like the first day of class. It's like reunion after a long, lengthy vacation, which started last October, unfortunately. Fast forward to now, and everybody is back together, new faces in new places and so forth. But there is an air of concern surrounding the Red Sox. Let's start with the manager, because 2024, there's a lot of question marks around this Red Sox team after everything that transpired during the offseason. And probably the biggest question, even though Alex Cora himself said the other day he doesn't want to talk about it, but it really is going to be a hot button topic this season as it pertains to the Boston Red Sox, and that is, could this potentially be Alex Cora's final season as manager of the Boston Red Sox, given that this is his final year of his current contract?
Yeah, it absolutely could be. But if you listen to Alex Cora throughout his coaching and managerial career, one thing he talks about is noise, and he likes to stay away from it, right? Whatever the noise is, he likes to focus on whatever's happening on that given day. He likes to talk about the team. He likes to deflect anything kind of away from himself, right? And people talking about his contract and whether he's going to be here or not. He doesn't want that noise to affect the team. Now, with that said, he's not the type of guy that wants to go out there. And I've heard him say this. He doesn't want to be the Lou Piniella. He doesn't want to be the Leland. He doesn't want to be the Baker. These guys that are lifetime managers, lifetime baseball guys. I don't see him really wanting to coach 55, 60, 65 years old, like a lot of these guys. He's got two young kids. He has an older daughter in college. I know just listening to him speak, he wants to kind of see his kids grow up. And if you coach or play baseball for long enough, you're missing a ton of things that are happening at home. And I had my kids after baseball, and what I do now broadcasting, I get to tuck them in at night. I get to see them in the morning. It's that in-between time, and it's only 6 months out of the year, really, where I'm super, super busy with baseball season. So Alex, whether he stays or whether he goes, he's going to be a hot commodity on the market. I feel like if you're another team, why wouldn't you want a guy that brings the energy that Alex Cora brings day in and day out? He's a great communicator. He's a great motivator. And if you give him the right pieces, he's proven that he can go out there and win a World Series championship. And that's not easy to do. Tio Francona was my first manager in the big leagues, and it was his first year as a Red Sox manager. And a lot of things have to go right in order to get that far, in order to win the World Series. And sometimes it's out of your control. You can only do so much. And I feel like with what he's been given throughout his managerial career, he's really made the most of it.
And he certainly has, especially after being away during the 2020 season, after everything that went down with the Houston Astros cheating scandal and so forth. And you've seen this time and time again that when he's been given the right recipe and the right ingredients to the soup, that he's been able to produce magic with it, and that's been a proven commodity of Alex Cora during his tenure as a manager of the Red Sox. And speaking of the ingredients, when I look at this team, I look at the roster, and I look at the transactions that the Red Sox have made this offseason, there's a lot of question marks surrounding the pitching rotation. And you being a former pitcher yourself, and I look at this rotation 1 through 5. I right now don't see a guy that is a clear-cut number one. I don't see Lucas Giolito as a guy who is a clear-cut number one starting pitcher for this rotation. He's maybe a number 2, a number 3 at best. Some people may view Brian Bayo as, although he's a young pitcher, but he could potentially be that guy one day when everything finally comes all together. Lenny, what is your concern in regards to the starting rotation for the Red Sox as we are now in the early stages of spring training?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. The concern is you don't have that obvious choice for a number one. What you do have is a bunch of guys kind of competing for that spot. And whether on paper throughout their career they are that guy, you can't do anything about what you did in the past. You can only change or make tomorrow or today, right? And Giolito's a guy. The past 3 seasons, he's gone out there and he's posted up 30 plus starts every year. So when Sale goes to Atlanta and you pull in a guy like Giolito, you're trading a guy that's a huge question mark for a guy that, you know what, you're going to get innings. You're going to have a guy that's going to go out there every 5 days and go out there and give you probably 5, 6, hopefully maybe 7 innings every now and then, which is kind of what they missed last season. And Bayo, I think you're right. I think he eventually will be a number 1 or 2 starter. He definitely has the stuff. He's got the mentality. He's got a ton of people in his corner that believe in him. As far as the Red Sox are concerned, you've got Pedro Martinez. That's obviously in his corner. There's a lot of similarities mechanics-wise from Bayo and Pedro. And I think the biggest next step is for Bayo to kind of get that mentality that Pedro brought every 5 days, right? That fight. Every time you go in there, he's not afraid to throw a ball right here in order to set up that next pitch or that changeup. But the stuff is there. And Pivetta, he's another guy that goes out there and takes a lot of pride in going 6, 7, 8. He's gone 9 innings before. We've seen it in the past. And he's another guy with great stuff. And you're just waiting on him to go out there and continue to improve and continue to go out there and say, listen, you could be a number 1 or 2 starter with the stuff that you have. You just have to keep getting consistency out of what you're bringing to the table every year. And a guy like Houck and Whitlock, they're again, stuff-wise, it's great. You need to get through the third time through the order, though. That's Houck's biggest fault so far. He's got great stats first, second time through the order. Third time around, it's a little bit difficult. And for me, I'd rather see him work on getting that third time through versus having a 5 and dive situation where, you know what, we're going to pull him no matter what after 5 innings. We're not going to give him that opportunity. And when that happens throughout a 162 game schedule, you get a worn out bullpen. And we saw that last year. I thought last year's bullpen with Jansen, the anchor at the back, with Chris Martin, 7th, 8th inning guy, kind of the bridge, and a lot of really, really good arms in between. They, on paper, they're a great bullpen, but when your starters are only averaging about 4.7 innings per game, they get tired. The bullpen goes out there and they're throwing more innings in the starting rotation. That's not sustainable throughout the season. That's what happened, in my opinion. So, again, you've got some guys that aren't obvious choices to be a number 1 or 2, but you've got a lot of underdogs out there competing that want to prove a lot of people wrong, because there's a ton of chatter, there's a ton of noise out there saying, listen, you
Oh
guys
yeah.
aren't going to win 78 games, right? You guys are no good, right? Tons of people are saying that. So you take an athlete, you take a competitor, and you throw that in their face, right?
Oh yeah.
Something's got to break, right? And hopefully it's the Red Sox going out there and winning a bunch of ball games and doing what they're obviously capable of doing at that level.
There was a name that you mentioned that's in the rotation this season, Garrett Whitlock. I watched him over the last couple of years, and the thing about Whitlock that intrigues me is the fact that this is someone who was in the bullpen, and there was debate at one point as to whether you leave him in the bullpen because he had been such an effective reliever, or do you put him into the rotation where he had long projected to be a solid big league starter. Last season, we got a good glimpse of him being in the rotation, and I mean his stuff still plays to be a starter. But I wonder going into this season, expectations, realistic expectations at that in terms of Whitlock, especially at the back end of the rotation. What is a realistic expectation for Whitlock this season in terms of starts, innings, ERA? Because I still think that there's part of his game that still needs just a little bit of fine tuning. But we're not talking about in terms of his stuff, but in terms of his ability to go deep into games. Would that be a fair assessment or not?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the biggest question and what we've seen throughout his career so far, and it's early on in his career. Let's be honest. He hasn't been in the
Mm-hmm.
big leagues that long. Is health wise? Can he sustain a healthy season, going pitching every 5 days, or going back to back days, or going every other day? Which is going to keep him on the field longer? Which is harder on his body? And that's kind of to be known. What I will say is I just saw him in Fort Myers last month, and to me, he looks like he's in the best shape I've seen him in the past few years. He's the first guy that shows up. He's the last guy that leaves. He takes a lot of pride every day getting to the ballpark and making sure that he outworks everybody. And when you're throwing the ball 95 to 98 miles an hour with really good stuff, it's easy sometimes to just go out there and say, listen, I've got a spot. This is my spot. Nobody's going to take it. But he doesn't do that, right? He has to go out there with the same mentality that he had as a Rule 5 guy that had to go out there and compete to make the team. He's been here, 3 seasons, I guess, and he still has that
Yeah.
mentality. I respect that. And I know that he takes a lot of pride in being kind of a Swiss Army knife, right? What do you need today? Do you need 3 innings from me out of the bullpen? Do you need a 7th inning where I just go out there and pump cheddar past these guys to get the Jansen? Or do you need me to start a game in a spot, right? Go 5 innings, 6 innings, whatever you need for me. And that's not something that everybody can do. Just automatically switch roles any given day or any given week. You don't really have a lot of players out there that A, want that job, or B, can do that job consistently and be successful. And I feel like that's a good tool to have in your belt. What he's going to do as far as the season start, relief, to be known. I mean, we just don't know. It's going to depend on what the team really needs, and we'll kind of have to see.
And that's part of the reason why I'm really intrigued by the upcoming season, especially just focusing on spring training for right now, because the pitching was such a big story last season, and not for the right reasons. In which that the starters, and at one point I said even last season that the starters were not giving you enough length. They're not going deep into ball games, and when your starters are not going deep into ball games, the relievers, they're the ones that you talked about it a little earlier. They're the ones that's gonna have to take the grunt of it. So you're seeing a lot of these blowouts where like you're behind, let's say 7-0 or 8-1 or 9-0, and your bullpen has to be in mop up duty. That is problematic. So when I look at the bullpen going into Kenny Jansen, who's going to be the closer this year, and we will talk about Chris Martin and so forth, and Josh Winkowski and so forth. I wonder what is the plan for Andrew Bailey and Alex Cora in terms of constructing the bullpen, in which that not only that you're going to have guys that can be able to be able to do a much better job sustaining themselves this season in comparison to last year, and also who do you view as your middle inning guys, your sixth or seventh inning guys? That's going to be the solid bridge that Kenley Jansen needs going into the ninth of the league.
Yeah, I think when you're putting together a bullpen, you've got to have strike throwers. The worst thing you can do is call a guy in from the bullpen. He goes out there, he walks two batters in the inning right there. That's managers hate it, teams hate it. It delays the game, puts everybody on their heels defensively. We can't have that. So you got to go out there and you got to have guys that pump strikes. You got to have guys, obviously, with great stuff. You got to have guys that can get lefties and righties out, right? Back in the day, 20 years ago, you've got a bunch of sidewinders, lefties, righties that can go in and get a lefty out, and he can get pulled after that one batter. Now you've got three batters you have to face. So you need a guy that can go out there and be effective versus lefties and righties. And overall, I think they've got those guys in Winkowski and Bernardino's a lefty that's proven successful against both lefties and righties as well. Whitlock, same thing, a middle inning guy. If they need him to go out there and do that, he can get it done. But listen, starters are going to get knocked out of games every now and then. They're gonna get knocked out second or third inning. My role in 2004 was to eat innings in the middle of the game when a starter got knocked out in the first or second inning, so we could save the bullpen. I started out in the big league level. I was proud to do it, and again, it just can't happen consistently, and that's what happened throughout the season last year, especially later on. Starters were just not getting deep at all. You've got to have guys that if one guy goes 5 innings, you got to have a guy that can go 7 innings, then another guy that goes 7 innings, and another guy that goes 6 innings. You can't have 5, 4 1/3, 6, 4, 5. That takes a toll on the bullpen because so many of these guys are going in pitching back to back or 2 out of 3 days, and it really takes a toll. So again, starters are going to get knocked out every now and then. It's bound to happen, but it just can't happen consistently, especially towards the latter half of the season when everybody's starting to get a little tired, just a little bit. That fatigue starts to set in. So you got to step up and get as deep as possible. And analytics these days too are making 5 innings look a lot better than they used to. Because if you go 2 times around the order, 2.5 times around the order, back 20 years ago, and I don't want to sound like an old man or anything, but you go 5 innings, you throw your glove in the locker when you're done. Can't believe I went 5 innings. But now they don't want guys going more than that because the third time around the order is too scary. A lot of the guys that have the numbers out there, averages are escalating third time around. And I get that. I get it. But I feel like I'm looking for a little bit more emphasis on pitchers determining how they go out there and get guys out a third time. Switch up the mix a little bit, start doubling up, tripling up, changing your spots, do something different third time around. So you don't have to run into a situation where the manager is looking at the lineup and saying, this is the third time. Let's just get them out of there. I want to see these guys compete. That's water cooler talk too, right? You see that? This guy went deep into the game. Nobody wants to talk about a starting pitcher going 5 innings. If you got a guy going 7, 8 innings, that's something worth talking about, especially these days. And I want to see more of it. Mm-hmm. That's just how I am, and I'm maybe a little bit old school.
No, I'm old school in that regard. Where I grew up in a time where I'm used to seeing starting pitchers like Pedro, Roger Clemens, Randy Johnson, Schilling going 7, 8 innings. It was a stamp of pride, like inning eaters, if you will. Like. And I don't take it as you're sounding like the old guy. I was born in 91. I grew up watching baseball in the 90s. I come from the cloth of the old school baseball, like in terms of how baseball is ultimately judged in terms of starters. Are your starters going deep into games? Or are your starters not allowing more than maybe 2 or 3 runs every 6 or 7 innings out when they're out there starting? And like in the bullpen as well, limiting the damage coming in high leverage situations. I'm used to that. Now, I feel strongly that the game has been overrun by analytics and it's been more of a detriment than it has been a benefit. Whereas old school baseball, it comes from the school of, okay, situational baseball. You got runners at first and second, and you got your left-handed starter who's gone, let's say 5 2/3 innings, but he's in a jam. He's clearly running out of gas. You go out and you bring in the best reliever possible that's going to be able to face that right-handed batter to get you out of that jam. Meanwhile, now I feel as if that numbers are ruling a lot of the decisions that the managers are making, and it's become more of more of a guide than a tool, and I think that's problematic. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the information has always been out there, right? I feel like
Yeah,
the information's been there. It was on paper before. Now it's on iPads, and everybody's got their iPad in the dugout. And I
yeah,
feel like sometimes there's a little bit of over analysis, paralysis by analysis. That is, instead of going out there and using your
yes.
instincts, rather than just playing the game, you got to reach in your back pocket and you got to pull out a card. This is where I play this guy. Back in the day, certain
Mm-hmm.
guys, they remember, okay, this guy's a pull hitter, or this guy likes to go the other way. We got a lefty up who likes to throw two seamers, which means he might hit the ball this direction. Now it's all in a chart in your back pocket or in your hat or wherever you keep it that says, I need to play this direction or whatever. But with the rule changes, I love the rule changes, keeping two guys on either side
Yeah.
of the infield. I hated when a guy batting a buck 20 had everybody shifting them to the right side, right? It was the Williams shift for a reason. The guy hit 406 on 41, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to
Yeah.
see 8 guys on that side of the field against a guy hitting a buck 20, and then the guy doesn't even lay a bunt down to third base, and there's nobody
Oh
there. That
yeah.
was the most frustrating thing to watch for me. Guys just weren't playing the game. But yeah, the information's out there. Some guys use it more than others. And I feel like get back to Cora, one thing Cora does really
Mm-hmm.
well is he uses the information, but he also uses the eye test pretty effectively too. He'll go out there and talk to a pitcher, and his mind's not made up oftentimes, depending on who the pitcher is, right? He'll talk to him, and he'll say,
Yeah.
okay, what do we got here? What are we feeling? How do you want to go about this? Rather than looking at the chart and saying, okay, third time through, you're out of here, right? And
Yeah.
there's something to be said about the eye test and the heart test. And good managers, can go out there within a few words in a sentence, determine whether this guy wants to be out there or not. You know what I mean? And in a tough situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be the determination on if you should get out of there, keep him in.
Most certainly, and in fact, I want to look at the position players, like specifically the infield, because last season I was on this very podcast. I was extremely critical of the infield defense. They were either near or at the top of the major leagues in terms of errors committed, and I said at the beginning of last season that errors and giving the opposition more than 27 outs is the ultimate cardinal sin in baseball. You cannot give the opposition more than 27 outs. The Red Sox were, if not probably, the worst team in Major League Baseball when giving the opposition more than 27 outs. Now, when I look at this upcoming season's infield, you got to start with Tristan Casas. There's so much has been made about him, and obviously Rafael Devers, a man in the hot corner at third. But I want to start with Tristan Casas for just a moment, because so much has been talked about in terms of his offensive potential and his ceiling and so forth. And it seemed like towards the end of last season that Casas was finally beginning to find his groove at the major league level. Lenny, going into the season, is it fair to expect that Casas will be able to take another step forward in terms of his progression and maturation as a major league hitter? Or do you think that that him having a full season like this 2024 season will only help him like mature as he continues to move through the season and gradually progress as well?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Cassis is concerned, I mean, he really turned a corner from his first year to his second year. I think a lot
Yeah.
of that had to do with hard work. A lot of that had to do with being comfortable at the big league level. Oftentimes, you go to AAA, AA, single A, you're pretty comfortable. You can go out there and be yourself. And then you get to the big leagues, and it's a different story. You got a lot of guys older than you, significantly older than you. And there's sometimes you really feel like you can't be yourself, or you're not allowed to be yourself. And he's a pretty unique individual. We've seen it. And
Yeah.
I feel like that clubhouse, that Red Sox clubhouse, specifically last year, was super chill, to be honest. I mean, they let him kind of be himself. If you want to go out there and sunbathe, sunbathe. You want to paint your nails, more power to you. Go out there and do whatever you have to do to go out there and hit bombs, catch the ball. It's all good. And for him to go out there and be himself, I think is a key part of him going out there and being successful, because you can just kind of let it go. If you're hitting, if you're fielding, if you're pitching, there can't be anything in your head other than what's happening in that given moment. You're not going to hit 98. If you're thinking about, someone coming down on you in the clubhouse about you doing something as a rookie, or give me the remote control, get off the couch. That stuff used to happen back in the day to the young players. So, I think that's part of it. I think having a guy last year like Duvall and guys like Duvall and Turner, these veteran guys in the clubhouse that kind of led by example, led by what they did on the field, as well as verbal stuff in the clubhouse. I feel like these guys really took Casas and guys like Duran and helped them take a corner in the right direction. And you could see it. I mean, it was evident that the maturity level and those two guys specifically was significantly better than it was the year before. And I'm glad you hit on defense too, though, because we're hard on the pitchers. We talked about how the pitchers didn't get deep in the game. A lot of that has to do with guys not catching it or throwing it. If you get your ground ball and your defense doesn't pick it up and make a good play, that's another 4 or 5, 6 pitches. You have to face the next batter. You dig your pitchers in a hole. And with that said as well, the pitcher, when they start knowing that their defense is subpar, they start changing their philosophy on the mound. They start thinking, okay, I can't pitch to contact anymore because I know they're not going to field it behind me. When you're pitching and you start to get the strikeout, that's where things start to fail, right? You start throwing, which causes you to be outside the strike zone or miss inside the strike zone in the wrong spot, i.e. down the middle, up. That's where power and damage comes from. So whenever I was pitching and I felt super confident that if I got the ball on the ground, my defense was going to take care of it, I was a way better pitcher. I was confident. I was able to let my movement in the zone and outside the zone get outs, and it helped me get ahead because, I'm not afraid to get a ground ball right here. So I'm going to go and do my best to get strike 1, strike 2, and then go out there and get these guys in and out 3 or 4 pitches, max them. That was my goal, right? And when you feel like if it's hit, they're not going to catch it, counts go up, pitch counts go up. You start to see 8, 9 pitches per at bat. Guys get tired, they don't get deep into games, and it's a domino effect from there.
Absolutely. And I'm a firm believer that in baseball, you ultimately have to be able to win with 2 things: pitching and defense. You can't slug your way to a World Series title these days. Like in October, pitching gets a lot more tougher. And if you don't have the defense to be able to back up the pitcher, whoever pitcher's on the mound, it's not a recipe for success. It just isn't. So last year, what I remember most from last season was when I realized it became an issue, the defense was an issue. It was actually during the Pirates series early on last season, where I was saying to myself, this is a problem. They're leading the major leagues in errors. This is not a recipe for success. And that was my first inkling that there's a bigger problem at play here than the lack of a legitimate home run threat outside of Rafael Devers. And you talked about leadership and having those veterans in the clubhouse. And there was a particular move that was made that actually bothered me from a pure baseball perspective. Justin Turner just recently signed with the division rival with the Toronto Blue Jays. He was an integral part of the clubhouse last year in terms of the leadership that he brought. And we all knew about the type of player that he was, the years that he's with the Dodgers and the clubhouse, and obviously on the field and so forth. And the Red Sox didn't do more to actually keep Justin Turner another year. Why do you think that is such a big loss for the Red Sox? And just how sorely is he going to be missed in terms of his offensive production as well, Lenny?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned before that Turner is a guy that is a clubhouse leader. And when you've got a younger clubhouse like the Red Sox have, you need somebody in there that's going to go out there and be verbal in the clubhouse and also kind of produce on the field, not just talk about it, go out there and do it. And he did exactly that, right? He was clutch at the plate. He loved hitting the ball to the monster. He did it day in and day out. He went out there and was super, super accountable. He was probably the most accountable guy, win or lose, the Red Sox had. When Bogarts was here, whether the Red Sox won or lost, he was always ready to talk to the press, and he kind of wore his emotions on his sleeve. If they were in a bad slump, you could almost see tears in Bogey's eyes. He felt it. He felt the pain that Red Sox Nation had. Turner was
Yeah.
kind of similar in that, right? Where he was always kind of there to take the mic and talk about what's happening in the clubhouse. And that's what you're missing this season. You're not going to have an older statesman that's going to go out there and be able to kind of take the youngsters under his wing, prove lead by example and verbal in the clubhouse. And if you look at what the Blue Jays have been missing the past few seasons, they've got a bunch of young players, a young,
Yeah.
talented crop of players that are just short when it comes to getting to the playoffs and going deep. And now they've got a guy in Turner who's going to take that mentality into that younger clubhouse. I think that's what they're doing. They're getting a guy that's they're banking on him doing what he did last year with the stick, being able to be versatile in the infield and outfield, DH, whatever they need him, he'll play everywhere. But also being that guy in the clubhouse to kind of steer this young crop of players that the Blue Jays have in the direction and get them over that hump that they just have failed to get past the past few seasons. It's remarkable to me that you've got that squad in Toronto and they haven't been able to do more with it as far as getting deep. And if you're a Blue Jay executive, I mean, I think that's what their thought process is,
Yeah.
going out and getting
I
a
agree.
guy that can kind of help them get to the next level. And not just a young guy, but a guy that's been there, done that, and can kind of steer them in the right direction.
And that's part of the reason why this season, I strongly believe, purely as a baseball fan, as a baseball hardcore person I've been my whole life, that this division is going to be a gauntlet. And I was talking about this some weeks ago, in which that the Red Sox biggest mistake this offseason was promising the fan base that they were going to go full throttle. And they've gone as full throttle as a tortoise can in a race. I mean, that's as full throttle as they possibly can go. Now, Lenny, I look at this division. I look at the AL East, and I said this the day that this happened. The day that the Baltimore Orioles went out and they changed ownership, I said this Orioles team, they're coming off a 100-win season ago. This division it's not even just the Yankees anymore. It's Baltimore, and Baltimore's for real. They're going to be for years to come. Not just this season, but for years to come. But focusing on 2024, they just went out and they acquired Corbin Burns from the Milwaukee Brewers. And when I made that move, I was like, oh boy, that was a pitcher that the Red Sox I thought they could have actually used in terms of having a bona fide ace on that pitching staff. When you look at a guy like Burns, who's now with Baltimore, and Baltimore's going to be a year older, a year wiser, and haven't had postseason experience as well, how does a move like that help make Baltimore an even more dangerous team in what is already a stacked division with the Yankees and as well as the Tampa Bay Rays, who are always going to be in it year in and year out?
Yeah. I mean, there's no better division in baseball. I don't care what anybody says. You look at the AL East, and it's nonstop, right? And for them to go out there and get a guy like Burns, you've got Jackson Holiday knocking on the door in the minor league level. He's just another guy that's going to go out there and help the team for years to come, right? And and Rushman, he's fun to watch out there. You've got all these guys that go out there that are super, super young. They know how to win. They did it a ton last year, right? And don't forget the Blue Jays. Don't forget Tampa. The Yankees don't want to be slumping another year, right? They're trying to go out there and win ball games. So again, you've got the even schedule now too, which means you're going to be playing an even schedule. You're going to go see every team, which helps the Red Sox. You're not going to be seeing the AL East quite as much. But again, it's what's frustrating for me and for a lot of Red Sox fans, I feel like, is we're not as far as you think. I think we're one number one pitcher away from setting a lot of people at ease at home. If you go out there and you get a guy, say Montgomery, you go out there and get Montgomery, everybody in Red Sox Nation shuts up tonight. They say, you know what? We got our number one. We got Giolito, we got Montgomery, and we got a bunch of guys behind them that are capable to fill 3, 4, and 5. And I know it's not my money, right? It's not my money. I can't go out there and open my wallet and get Montgomery. I get that. But I feel like that's where the frustration is because we're so close. We really are. Defensively, with Vaughn Grissom at second base, you got him locked up for 6 years. You got O'Neill in left field. Moss is going to get the majority of his at-bats in the DH position. If O'Neill can stay healthy and get back to his 2021 form, If Grissom can prove that what he did at the minor league level can be sustainable at the big league level, Trevor Story's healthy, Casas coming off a great year, Duran, Rafaela possibly in center field. You've got a ton of talent defensively that if they can go out there and improve on last season, it's going to help the pitching staff. So again, we're not that far away. It's just that one missing piece, in my opinion, that can set everybody at ease and help them sleep better at night, which is also the frustrating part because it just doesn't look like it's going to happen at this point.
It is frustrating because these are quality free agents that are still sitting there and spring training is underway. And I know that a lot of them are Scott Boras clients, which is another layer of like, oh, you got to be bleeping me. Like, come on, like get these players signed already. Like what are we doing? And I want to go back to the Montgomery point you were making because I think out of all the free agent pitchers that are still available right now, that's the one guy that I think maybe a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal at most would probably do the trick. Should do the trick in terms of adding a bona fide number one starter in which that you saw what he did last postseason for the Texas Rangers, what he did in the World Series and so forth. Yet the Red Sox just won't make the move, and it's not as if it's too late, but yet it looks like that, as you mentioned, it's probably not going to happen. But maybe it could happen tonight, maybe it can happen tomorrow, but who knows? So the question that I have, and it's killing me to ask this, from a baseball perspective, if the Red Sox were to go into 2024 with the rotation that it currently is right now, how confident are you in terms of this rotation being able to consistently give you innings, quality starts, and as well as do a better job in terms of like a run prevention as well?
Yeah, so I mean, all we have to work on or use to gather this information is last year and the year before, because a lot of these players have been there during that time span, and that's not great. That's not great. 278 win seasons in a row. The Red Sox brass, the manager, the players will be the first to tell you that's not acceptable for them, right? So if you look at what they've done in the past couple of seasons, it's not the most optimistic I've ever been going into a Red Sox season, right? Now, with that said, if the defense can go out there and improve on last season, pick up the baseball, catch it, and throw it, that's going to help the pitchers. It's going to help these guys go out there and get deeper into games. I know Trevor Story had a mini camp. Talk about leaders, right? Trevor Story is kind of coming into his own. He's in the Red Sox uniform for a few years now. He brought a bunch of the infielders to his home, had a little mini camp working on defense, talking philosophy, getting reps in, boosting confidence, right? That's the biggest thing. These guys are elite athletes. They know they're good enough to catch the ball and throw it. They just have to believe in themselves, continue to get reps, and go out there and perform. Now, Giolito, they brought him in. Again, he's thrown, 31, 30, 33 innings outings, games started the past 3 seasons. That's great. If he can do that again this season, that's going to help the team in a big way. Because again, when you're letting Sale go to the Braves, he only had 31 starts combined in the last 3 seasons. So look at what you're getting in return right there. If he can get back to his old form, and with the help of Andrew Bailey and Breslow and all these other guys that are talking about revamping the pitching from top to bottom, you possibly can get him back to his old form. If talking to Bailey, I played with Bailey in the Oakland Athletics organization, and he's talking about, in order to make guys that have been proven winners in the past get back to old form, you're talking about either taking away pitches, adding pitches, using certain pitches that you might not be using a ton in the past couple of years, using those more, right? Going and looking at what you can do effectively, what you do really well, and harnessing that and sticking with that. It could be, just throwing one pitch more or one pitch less, or throwing to one side of the plate more or less, boosting your confidence. I know a lot of being successful is going out there and just letting the dominoes fall. Have one good outing, go 6 innings, take that into the next outing 5 days later, and just kind of letting it roll from there. So hopefully getting on the right foot at the beginning of the season, staying healthy throughout spring training gets these guys to where they can go out there and win ball games in April. Because we've seen it in the years past. If you win a ton of games in April, listen, when you're struggling in July or August and you're scuffling, some guys are hurt, those games count just as much, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
I feel like a lot of it has to do with going out there and winning early on.
And that's why the start that the Red Sox get off to in March next month, which is just it's amazing to even say that. But the start that the Red Sox are going to need to get off to, especially with the road trip that they're going to have to start the season, is going to be so critical. And speaking of what is critical for this team, I look at the outfield, and the outfield had concerns. There was definitely points of frustration last season, but there was one player that I thought that stood out to me from at the beginning, and that was Masa Yoshida. He got out to a good start in the first half of the season, but what I did notice was that in the second half of the season, fatigue set in because he's never played 162 games in a regular season. This is for those watching or listening. The Japanese regular season is different from the Major League season. Like you're playing more, you're playing every day, and the constant wear and tear that the everyday player goes through, and so forth. But Yoshida, I look at you talk about Tyler O'Neill, who the former St. Louis Cardinal, who comes over to the Red Sox, who offensively was able to do damage when he was in St. Louis, and as well as Rob Refsnyder, the veteran, who also is going to be a key piece for the Red Sox this upcoming season. When you look at the outfield in terms of defense and especially offensive production, how much more faith do you have in their ability overall to be a lot more productive this season than what you saw last year? Because I'm really curious what you're going to get out of Tyler O'Neill and what Yoshida was able to learn from last season after going through that second half fatigue.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I believe in Japan they've got every Monday off. I mean, think about that. If you have a day off every week, that's huge when you're talking about 1, maybe 2 days off a month. And some of those days you're using for travel. It's a grind. It's a hectic season. You hear players talk about that all the time. It's when we were in Toronto and Tampa where we were playing on turf, the trainers oftentimes would say, listen, don't even go out there and get your poles in. Don't run any sprints because I know running on that turf, your guys' backs, your hamstrings, your butts are going to be sore, right? So there's little things that you can do throughout the season to kind of help alleviate fatigue. And Yoshida, I feel like having him take most of his at bats and the DH position is going to help him, right? Keeping him off the outfield. At times he struggled in the outfield, kind of getting used to that wall, staying healthy. But offensively, I think he hit, some huge strides, being able to make adjustments relatively quickly. There was one part earlier in the season, when that bat I was looking at, where he was getting beat up and away. He was kind of rolling over that pitch, grounding out. And somebody told me, yeah, he got in the cage and he was just working nonstop, super diligently, getting to that outside pitch, working on driving that the other way, sitting back, letting it get deep and staying on top of it and through it. And I think the next game, somebody threw him a pitch up and away, which you're going to do if that's a weakness, right? A pitcher's looking at that, they want to exploit it, and boom, hit it the other way. And it was no longer a weakness, right? So for him to go out there and show that he can make adjustments on the fly, at bat to at bat, game to game, shows a big maturity level and a guy that wants to go out there and get it done. And he did. Offensively, I think he's a powerhouse. He has a ton of power. He can go out there and help the teams in many ways. And you want to put a guy in uniform that's going to help you in a certain way. And offensively is his chance to go out there and do that. Defensively, I think O'Neill's an upgrade. He's a guy that can go out there and hopefully adjust to the wall, stay healthy more than anything. Because 2021, where he was at his best, he was healthy, and then he started to falter once he started getting injured. So. And that's for anybody at the big league level. If you can stay healthy, you can go out there and be yourself and go out there and produce. So for him, I feel like that's the key.
Absolutely. And I want to use this time now to look back 20 years ago to the 04 team, in which that 04 team changed the Red Sox. It changed the trajectory of the Red Sox. Obviously, she broke the curse. But I strongly believe that there are so many things that 04 team changed, and you were part of that 04 Red Sox team, in which that I mean, Red Sox fans love to talk about the pitching that the Red Sox had on 04 with Pedro and Schilling, obviously having Keith Falk as the closer. I mean, offensively, you can talk about Ortiz and Manning being Manning and so forth, Johnny Damon and so forth, and obviously Bill Miller. And the list goes up and down the entire roster. And as someone who was part of that 04 team as a pitcher, and I always find myself looking at that 1-2 punch of Pedro and Schilling. You were around that team almost but for a considerable amount of time during that season. What made those two particularly so special that season? Because that was the year that Schilling won 20 games. Pedro, although he had a little bit of a higher ERA, but he was still a very good a pitcher in his own. But what made those two in particular like so much fun to watch on a nightly basis?
So for me, as a youngster, I was 24. I was a Rule 5 guy. I made the club. Tito Francona pulled me aside in the middle of pitcher's fielding practice in spring training. He said, "Listen, Lefty, you made the club. Congratulations." And and at that point, I'm like, "Okay, all right, here we go. I'm pitching in the big leagues now, and that's great." But for a 24-year-old rookie, looking at guys like Pedro, guys like Schilling, they knew they were good, right? They walked around the clubhouse and they knew that the other team might as well leave their bats in the dugout that night, right? And there's a lot to be said when you know you're that good, right?
Yeah.
If you don't believe it, if you don't know you're going to go out there and shove that night, then listen, you don't have a shot. And those guys had confidence overflowing, right? And that's a good thing. If you're going to go out there and that's your day, every fifth day, you've got the baseball. Pedro, Schilling, and even the other guys in the rotation, when it was their turn, you knew, man, these guys are going to go out there and they're going to do an outstanding job, right? And sometimes it didn't work. That's the nature of the beast. Sometimes they would get knocked out in the first, second, third inning. They wouldn't have their game, right? But you could just read it on their face when they took the baseball that they were going to go out there and compete their butts off and go out there and give you the best that they possibly are going to give you that on any given day, and especially that given day.
And sticking with pitchers, because like they were so much fun to watch, like especially from afar. Like I mean, Schilling, like he had came that off season prior to the 04 spring training from having pitched with Arizona. He was a big part of another legendary 1-2 punch, Schilling and the Hall of Famer Randy Johnson with the 01 Arizona Diamondbacks team that won the World Series. Now he comes to Boston. Now there was another member of that 04 team that you've had the chance to play with and you've had the chance to work with. And I'm talking about the late Red Sox Hall of Famer Tim Wakefield, who sadly succumbed to brain cancer this past October. And I wish personally that he got the chance to live to be a part of obviously like the upcoming celebrations this upcoming season, but to be able to see another year and so forth. I want to ask you, what are your memories of Tim Wakefield, both as a teammate and as well as a colleague at NESN?
Yeah. So my first year in a Red Sox uniform, I was a rookie, and Wake could be hard on the young guys, right? He would be hard on the young guys because when he came up as a Pittsburgh Pirate, there was an old school mentality where, rookies acted a certain way and the veterans treated the rookies a certain way, right? And that was just how it was. And in 2004, I was the young guy. I got the short stick that year, and I would do it again in a heartbeat because you know what? That's it's a rite of passage, right? And ask anybody back then, even Pedroia. Wakefield was hard on Pedroia. And I look back on it now and I respect it. The guy went out there and he wasn't just hard on the rookies just to be hard on the rookies. I feel like he went out there and he's trying to let them know that this is special. Don't take anything for granted. Yeah, you can be happy to be there. And I absolutely was. but don't get comfortable, because comfortable guys in my shoes as a rookie, as a 24-year-old youngster, don't stick around long, right? They're here and then they're back in AAA, and you never know if they're going to get that chance again, right? So I feel like it was his way of going out there and making these young guys go out there and really appreciate where they were, right? And he always used to have this saying, right? Hey, don't be doing that unless you get more dirt in your spikes, right? Which means you got to play a little longer to go out there and be that comfortable. And I look back on it now and I appreciated it. And when I was there in 2005 and 2006, when I earned my stripes and I was there and I got my dirt in my spikes, so to speak, I felt like I was more of a teammate. And when we started working together at NESN, it was a blast. I started there in 2017, and we worked together a lot. And I really enjoyed working with him and come to work every day, as I still do. Getting to Fenway Park and in Watertown when we're on the road, I love what I do. I love talking baseball, and he was a big part of that. As a player, sharing a locker room and a uniform with Tim Wakefield was a pleasure, because nobody wore the uniform with more pride than him. And then it was also a pleasure working with him or in front of the camera, I should say, talking Red Sox baseball, because he was an absolute legend. And that's just what he did on the field. When you talk about Tim Wakefield, the stuff that he did off the field for the Jimmy Fund, in my opinion, is even more important than what he did in a Red Sox uniform, because, it's going to be felt for generations to come. Just how he went out there and took the Jimmy Fund and put them on his back, right? Figuratively and literally. There's pictures of Tim Wakefield with kids on his back walking at Fenway Park. And I'll always have that memory of him just really wearing that role and enjoying it and making the most of it.
And he was truly such a joy to be able to watch, but as well as I enjoyed watching and listening to him on like NESN, on like the pregame and postgame, like breaking down like pitchers and so forth, and him being a knuckleballer, and that's what in terms of the baseball aspect, him being a knuckleballer, and they were such a small group of guys in baseball, which that they didn't grow on trees. Like, so if you were a knuckleballer, there was like a special fraternity that he was a part of.
That's extremely hard to do. If you think about it, how many knuckleballers are on planet Earth at any given time? Maybe 5. How many of those are in the big leagues? Do we have any? Maybe 1. I mean, I don't know if there's any knuckleballers in the big leagues right now. Every third baseman will throw you a knuckleball from 40 feet away, and it'll be nasty. It'll be a really good pitch. But you get them 60 foot 6 inches away, right? And you put a batter in the box. It's a different story. I remember he was on the bucket one time, and I was shagging in the outfield. I said, "Hey, wait, toss me that knuckleball. Let me see what it looks like." And I literally had my glove up here, and the ball was about to go in my glove, and it hit me in the kneecap, like dead on the kneecap. I'm like, oh, that's why people look terrible at the plate, because it starts here, and then a split second later, it drops like 3 feet. It's impossible. It's extremely frustrating. You see these hitters just scratching their head going to the dugout afterwards, but extremely hard pitch to throw. Everybody thinks they can throw one, right? But you're not going to throw one at the big league level for how long that he did with his success. It's really a feat.
It really is. And you think about like what he was able to accomplish when he was with the Pirates, and obviously like with the Red Sox and so forth. And you talk about the longevity. I mean, 20 seasons from 92 to 2011 to be able to be a knuckleballer. I mean, it is legendary stuff. I think of guys like Phil Niekro, for goodness sakes. I think about R.A. Dickey, who won the Cy Young Award in 2012 as a knuckleballer with the New York Mets, and
Charlie Huff.
Charlie Huff, another one. Like, it's just hard.
So all those guys were communicating too. When Wakefield struggled at points, he would kind of talk to these guys, and they would give insights. That's a small fraternity. Wow. All these guys I know they were like, in the cell phones back in the day, you got your Fave 5. Yep. All those guys were in their Fave 5. All those guys were on speed dial, so they could kind of discuss. Because listen, if I'm a pitching coach and a knuckleballer is struggling, what am I going to tell him? Right? I don't know. I have no idea, right? So, and I work with kids all the time, pitching, mechanics, philosophy, how to go about getting batters out. I mean, if you're a knuckleballer, right, what do? You call other knuckleballers, and that's what they all did. They all kind of communicated with each other and helped each other out, which is really cool to know and see.
Absolutely. Speaking of the '04 Red Sox, like, give me a story in which that when you look back on it now, and I'm sure all of them you will look back on it and smile, but something that stands out in your memory about that '04 season and what made it so special and memorable for you, given that it was also your rookie season as well.
Yeah. So one thing that I'll always remember, just personally, is my first outing in the big leagues.
Mm,
It was in Old Yankee Stadium, April 23rd. I know the date off the top of my head. Uh,
wow.
Derek Lowe started. It was kind of a blowout, and we were ahead a lot. And Tito put me in the ball game, the ninth inning. Couldn't do too much damage. They were that much ahead, and I had to go out there and I faced Gary Sheffield, Hideki Matsui, and Bernie Williams. Those are the three guys I had to face. Never pitched in AAA. I was in Single A and Double A the year before, and I had to go
Mhm.
out and get these three guys out. And I got Sheffield to ground out to third base. Mark Bellhorn made an outstanding play, struck Matsui out, and I got Gary Sheffield to ground out to third base as well. Another great play by Bellhorn. I'll always remember that feeling of just straight nervousness running onto the field, of my warm-up pitches where I'm trying to talk myself into being successful. I'm like, listen, it's still 60 foot 6 inches. It's no bigger than any field you've thrown on since we were 13, because it felt like it's about 89 feet when I was throwing. And
Wow.
I ended up getting through it. But in the broad scheme of things, when I think about '04, what sticks out to me is when we were in the parade afterwards, right? And there's 3.5 million people or so
Yeah.
hanging off light posts, screaming their heads off. There's a certain group of people that I would sporadically see. They would hold pictures, black and white photos of grandma or grandpa that are no longer
Wow.
with us. People holding up like they ran out of their house to go to the parade and they took a picture off the mantle of people that were no longer with us, people that didn't get to experience a World Series. 86 years is a lifetime.
Yeah.
A lot of people waited for a long, long time through some really good Red Sox teams and seasons. If you think about it, 67, right?
Yeah.
75,
Mhm.
86, right? A lot
Yep.
of great teams, and they just didn't quite get to the point where they saw it. So people were running out, holding pictures of family members that were no longer with us with tears streaming down their face. That kind of
Wow.
hit me in a way where even when I think about it and I picture it in my mind now, it kind of gets you, right? So
Mhm.
that World Series, in a lot of ways, for me, is special for the fans and for the folks that are no longer with us, that waited for so long and aren't with us here, but maybe they're still looking down and appreciating it.
So going back to I want to go out to that parade because as you mentioned, 3.5 million, which I mean, it's still like jarring. Like to this day, when you think about all of the parades that Boston has seen over in the course of 20 years, between 2001 and like in 2019, and you talk about the memories of people who brought pictures and of deceased loved ones who didn't get the chance to live to see that day. When you look back at that parade as a travel down Boylston Street, what about the experience made it so memorable? Was there a particular moment that stood out to you in a midst of just an overwhelming celebration that went literally into the Charles River,
Yep.
but also like what stood out to you in terms of just the memories from that particular day? Because it was a rainy day, but it didn't care. It was like the happiest rainy day in New England.
Yeah. It was. And when you're experiencing something like that, it's hard to take in and really appreciate what's happening in the moment. I kind of
Mhm.
wish I would have taken it in a little bit more, but fortunately I had one of those cameras, the ones where you wind up, you take
Yep,
it
I
there, like a
do. Yes.
disposable camera. I had a
Yep.
disposable camera. That ages me a little bit right there. So I have
Old.
photos that I can pick up and look at, not digital, like actual photos from that day in a
Yeah.
box that I can look at, and it just you're right. It was a rainy, kind of a dreary day, but nobody cared, right? Everybody's still out there, and everybody's having a blast. And you look at those photos, and you can see folks hanging from like light posts,
Mhm.
stop signs, or hanging on them. Everybody's trying to get the best look and to get close to the duck boats and being on one of those boats I mean, it's really a pinch me moment, right? Because the year before, like I said, I was pitching in single A and double A in front of hot dog vendors and girlfriends. That's it. And then all of a sudden, I'm pitching at Fenway Park in front of 37,000 people, playoff atmosphere every night, pitching against the New York Yankees, my first outing. It's like, what happened, right? This is pinch me. How did I get here? It took a lot of hard work. It took a little bit of luck. Maybe somebody watching me in a game where I don't know. I mean, I work my tail off, but at the end of the day, a lot of people work their tails off. A lot of people had way better stuff than I've ever had as far as pitching. I tell people this all the time. The last time I had the best arm or the fastest fastball on any team that I played on, I was 12 years old.
Wow.
Right? From 13 all the way till I retired from 33, I can't say one time I had the best fastball on any of those teams, right? So I had to go out there and get it done in different ways. I had to go out and compete in different ways, whether it's changing speeds, making the ball move, which is why I was able to get there. I made the ball move all over the place, and it's hard to look back and take it all in. And I don't even think my kids realize I played in the big leagues. Maybe my 11-year-old, right? So wow. I'm glad I have those pictures to show them one day that hey, Dad did something. It was a small part of something relatively huge in the scheme of things. We'll see.
Like you talked about your first big league appearance, April of 2004, at Old Yankee Stadium. I went to Old Yankee Stadium a lot as a kid. Grew up in New York. I know how special of a place that is in the heart of not just Yankee fans, but in the heart of like baseball fans, period, who had the chance to visit. You pitched on the mound at Old Yankee Stadium. What was that like as a pitcher? Like just standing on the same mound of ghosts, because literally you were like, for the younger audience who did not get the chance to really appreciate and watch games at Old Yankee Stadium, to have gone to Old Yankee Stadium, and you could speak on this better than I can. You played at Old Yankee Stadium, was literally playing in the house of Baseball Cathedral, where ghosts of legends played.
The house that Ruth built. It's the house that Ruth built.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible to think about it. When I was running out that ninth inning, my first game, it felt so big to me because it's so tall. The grandstands, it's so tall, right? You felt like, I felt like I was in that movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where the kid's in the cereal bowl in the movie. That's what I felt like. I felt like I got shrunk down and I was in a giant cereal bowl, just looking up. And I couldn't feel my legs. The Yankee fans were yelling all kinds of stuff to me. They knew exactly who I was. This guy's a rookie. He's never pitched before. Let's let him have it. So they were yelling all kinds of stuff, trying to make me nervous. You're a bum. You need to go back to AAA. You're terrible, right? Just yelling all these things at me when I'm trying to build myself up to go out there and get my feet wet in a big league uniform. And man, it could have gone south really quickly, right? I mean, facing those three guys, I mean, you're talking about Hall of Fame quality guys, right? Gary Sheffield, Bernie Williams, Matsui had an outstanding career, right? These guys are amazing guys, and it could have gone south really, really fast. I'm fortunate enough to go out and say I got them. I shut them down 3 up and 3 down with a little bit of help from, like I said, Bellhorn and Dave McCarty, who's like 8'9" at first base stretching. Yeah, they helped me out. But yeah, that's an unbelievable experience. I had a chance to go to New Yankee Stadium when I was with Kansas City in 2009. And you walk into that stadium, and it's like you walk into an office building, right? You've got the tiled ceiling. Everything's kind of, cubicle. You go there, you get to the clubhouse, and are we in a baseball stadium? Going into Old Yankee Stadium felt like I was in like the last level, about to face the boss in Super Mario Brothers, right? There's like
I know what you're talking about.
There's like pipes everywhere and asbestos, and it's like Babe Ruth walked here, right? Babe Ruth walked here. Lou Gehrig walked here. These guys, it looked dangerous walking around to get to the clubhouse. It was old and dangerous, and it had that mystique, and it was incredible. And the clubhouse wasn't huge, but they had a lot of really good food. These guys did it right. The clubhouse guys in New York did an outstanding job with the spreads, and And you don't get bread anywhere like in New York, right? They've got
Yeah.
those Italian rolls and everything ready. Probably
Oh yeah.
slowed us down a little bit. I don't know if the Yankees had those rolls in the clubhouse, but I always look forward
Maybe
to
it was
going
by
there because the
design,
food
Lenny.
was amazing.
And you talk about pitching at Old Yankee Stadium, and you were part of the Red Sox in '05. And the Red Sox that '05 season, they go on the road, they go to Wrigley, and at that time, I remember that series well because that Sunday game was on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. That's how big of a deal it was that during that '05 season. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, like, you talk about Old Yankee Stadium. I mean, there's not, in my opinion, nothing's going to top Old Yankee Stadium. That's no disrespect to Fenway Park at all. But we're talking about in the grand scheme of things, in terms of the history of baseball. There's Old Yankee Stadium, there's Wrigley Field, and Fenway Park is literally right there. Those are the top three in terms of history of baseball. Any memories that sticks out with you in terms of, pitching at Wrigley? Anything you may have remembered from your experience and so forth, that you'd like to share?
So I didn't pitch at Wrigley in '05. I didn't. I missed that series for some reason. I can't remember
Oh.
where I was, but I will say that Wrigley Field, they're not tearing that down. They're not tearing Fenway Park down. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing everything they possibly can to keep those parks kind of updated up to 2024 and beyond standards, but also keeping that museum feel, right?
Yes.
Part of what what they've done, this administration or regime that owns the Red Sox now has done is they've really done an outstanding job of keeping the Red Sox or Fenway Park kind of that old feel museum. You want to keep the old, but you also want to kind of update it and bring it into this century as well. They've done a great job doing that. The Cubs' recent renovations doing the same things, adding some seats into the outfield, making sure that you're going to be able to fit enough people comfortably in the stadium, and adding the jumbotrons and everything else that you're going to need in this day and age. But I wish I pitched at Wrigley Field. I never did. I never did. I played, as far as interleague, I remember going to San Francisco, Houston, back when it was a National League park. Philadelphia, I got an at bat in Philadelphia. Corey Lytle, rest in peace, struck me out
Oh
in
yeah,
Philadelphia.
that's
But
right.
yeah, interleague. For some reason I didn't make that trip to Wrigley Field, unfortunately.
Last question, and I could sit here and talk baseball for the next 2-3 hours, but one last question before I let you go. When you look at this current Red Sox regime, and I'm talking in terms of the ownership, the front office, in terms of the criticism that they have faced this off season, and I'm really am curious to see how things will look when the Red Sox return home from its lengthy road trip to start the 2024 regular season. If there is a positive or something to at least give Craig Breslow like some sort of credit in terms of anything that he's trying to do or he's planning to do moving forward to return the Red Sox back to contention again, what would it be? Because Red Sox fans, I can't remember a time that Red Sox fans were as truly as down and out about this team entering the season that I can ever remember. Even the years that the Red Sox finished last, it wasn't anything like this from what I've seen.
Yeah, I feel like the regime, especially guys like Sam Kennedy, he's been accountable. And when he's asked, "What do you think about the Red Sox?" He will say, "Listen, we've got to be better. We've got to go out there. We've got to put a respectable team on the field." I've heard him say it. I firmly believe that he believes it, and he's putting the team in capable hands with Craig Breslow. He's a teammate of mine, really, really smart individual, and Breslow's able to put in pieces around him and that he's able to kind of delegate to. Andrew Bailey. We all played in the Oakland organization together, and another really smart guy who's going to go out there and kind of put his fingerprint on this pitching staff from top to bottom, minor leagues up into the big league level. So, you know what? Yeah, there's a missing piece. There's a starting pitcher to go out there that if they were to go out and get him tonight or tomorrow, a lot of people would be at ease. But, as far as accountability, I feel like the writing's on the table, right? It's on the wall as far as there's an emphasis on development. over acquiring free agents at this point, because there's a
Yep.
ton of talent at the minor league level, whether it's this year or next year or the year after that. A lot of young talented players knocking on the door that are going to be able to go out there and help this ball club, hopefully in the near future. We'll just have to see. One bright spot, they're an underdog. Who doesn't like an underdog story? These guys, like I said before, have been told time and time again by different faces and different avenues all over the place, saying that you guys are no good, right? And you tell an athlete, a guy that, or guys that compete at that level, that you're no good, they're going to do something. You got to go out there, and because you can only do that or go tuck your tail and run, right? And these guys aren't that type. You're not putting together a team of guys that are going to go out and do that. So I feel like they've got something to prove. I love an underdog story. I feel like they if they do a few little things better than they did last year, i.e. defensive improvement, getting deeper into games as far as the starting rotation, a lot of the right pieces will fall into place. And we're just going to have to wait and see. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. In the 2024 season, and I just remembered, what really truly last question, because I was about to forget about this, the most important question I wanted to ask you, and that is, I have seen the baseball jerseys that the players have been wearing so far in training camp. I ripped them to shreds just 2 days ago, both on the video that I posted both on Twitter and as well as on TikTok. And as a former player, when you see the just the lack of quality in these new jerseys that Fanatics have made, what goes through your mind? Like, what are your thoughts on the new jerseys that Fanatics have been making for these players?
I mean, it's throughout the league too, right? It's not just Red Sox, right? So I think the difference is it was Majestic, right? I believe
it was Majestic. It was Nike last year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think it was Nike last year, but they were made by Majestic. But I feel like they were made by Majestic last year, but Nike put their logo on them. This year, it's Nike made by Nike. So that's why you're seeing a noticeable difference between the jerseys, and it's tough. It's not a great look at this point, right? And some of the things I've read, like these look like the jerseys hanging up in Walmart, right? Like so I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. They might not be the prettiest uniforms, but you know what? We'll see what happens. It's not the uniforms, it's the guys in the uniform, right? So I don't think the uniforms are going to make them win or lose ball games. I feel like it's the guys putting on the uniforms and that are going to be making it happen.
Absolutely. And I'm not a fan of it at all. I've not minced words. I'll say it bluntly on this podcast. And they look like trash. I mean, in terms of just quality and in the lettering and so in the back of the jerseys, it's like, really, come on. I mean, you could have done a lot better. Act like you cared, and so forth. But that's just me. But with that being said, good.
Well, hopefully they wear those City Connect uniforms more. I actually like those, the yellow and blue City Connect uniforms.
They actually look nice.
Yeah, I don't mind those. They're better than a lot of the other teams' City Connect jerseys.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully Fanatics didn't ruin that one somehow, some way. I mean, that's just a prayer at this point. That's just a prayer at this point. But it has been an absolute blast and a pleasure to speak with you, Lenny DiNardo of NESN. Catch him on the NESN broadcast, Red Sox basically throughout the entire season on NESN. Lenny, man, it's been a blast talking with you on this pod. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk about the team, the upcoming season, looking back on 04, reflecting on Tim Wakefield and everything. So thank you so much, my man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hopefully you're talking about a playoff berth in October, hopefully a World Series. We'll see. Thanks for having me, though. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, man. I appreciate talking with you, and as well as let's see what happens come September. The Red Sox are playing games and whatnot. Look forward to it.
Absolutely.